After her divorce, she moved with her 3 children into her sister's house. Her sister had 3 children of her own and worked long hours as a doctor. The decision was practical. She needed a place to stay while attending school, and her sister needed help managing the home. The arrangement was meant to last until she could support her family independently. The first few weeks were manageable. The house was crowded but organized. Her sister left early in the morning for work and returned late at night. During those hours, she managed everything at home: meals, school runs, cleaning, and childcare for all 6 children. The routine was full but steady. One evening, during dinner, an issue began that changed the balance of the household. She had cooked spaghetti for everyone. 95% of viewers aren't subscribed. Subscribing is free, takes seconds, and makes a real impact. Click subscribe and be part of the growth. Please turn on the bell for more updates. When she served the food, her 12-year-old niece didn't start eating. The girl sat quietly, staring at her plate. Her sister instructed her to add a few chicken nuggets from the freezer to the plate. After that, the niece began eating normally. That night, after the children were in bed, her sister explained that her daughter had autism and a restrictive eating disorder called ARFID. The nuggets were part of a routine that allowed her to eat it all. Without them, she often refused food completely. From that day on, every meal included chicken nuggets for her niece. It became a simple part of preparation. Whatever the family ate, a few nuggets were added to one plate. It worked smoothly at first. Her niece ate consistently, and her sister was relieved. But within a week, her own children started to notice the pattern. They asked why their cousin always got nuggets while they did not. She told them their cousin needed them, and that it was not about preference. The explanation didn't last. Soon, every dinner included the same question. They said it was unfair. She refused to change the rule. Everyone else would eat the same meal, and only their cousin would have the extra item. Her sister supported this when she was home, but most evenings she was at the hospital. That left her alone with 6 children, who now viewed dinner as an argument waiting to happen. The tension spread beyond the house. Her children mentioned the issue to their father. He called to suggest letting everyone share the nuggets occasionally. Later, their grandmother called with a similar opinion. She listened but decided to stay consistent. Her niece began eating less. Although she still had nuggets at every meal, she grew quieter during dinner and avoided attention. The other children's frustration didn't fade. Each meal began with complaints and ended in silence. One morning, she entered the kitchen and found her niece sitting on the floor with the freezer open. Nuggets were scattered across the tiles. The girl had dropped the bag and was trying to pick them up. She helped her clean up and put the food away. When her sister came home that night, she explained what had happened. Her sister thanked her and asked her to continue following the same plan. The pattern continued. Meals became repetitive. The air fryer ran daily, and nuggets became a fixed part of the routine. The children still protested occasionally, but she ignored it. The next major conflict happened 2 weeks later. She cooked roast chicken, mashed potatoes, and vegetables for dinner. As usual, she added 4 nuggets to her niece's plate. Her 8-year-old son looked at it and refused to eat. He said it was unfair. The others agreed and pushed their plates away. She told them that their cousin's meal was different for medical reasons, but they wouldn't listen. The argument escalated until her niece stood up and left the table without eating. When her sister came home later, she found her daughter upset in her room. She spoke privately with her, then told her that the situation was affecting everyone. Her sister said her daughter blamed herself for the fights and asked that mealtimes be handled carefully. The next day, she found the empty box of nuggets on the counter. Her niece was sitting at the table, crying quietly. Her own children stood nearby. They admitted they had taken the nuggets earlier in the day. Their cousin said she could not eat anything else. That evening, when her sister arrived home, she explained what had happened. Her sister listened and said that if the conflict continued, she would have to make other arrangements for her and the children. That night, she stayed up late cleaning the kitchen. She opened the freezer and found one unopened bag behind the ice cream. She decided to save it for the next day. The following evening, she cooked early. Her sister was still at work, and the kids were outside playing. She made pasta and prepared 4 nuggets in the air fryer. Everything was ready when her daughter came into the kitchen and asked for one. She refused, reminding her of the rule. Her daughter complained briefly and went outside again. A few minutes later, her niece came downstairs and sat at the table. When she turned back to the counter, the nuggets were gone. The plate was empty. She heard the back door close. Outside, her children were sitting on the porch, eating from a napkin. She realized what had happened, but didn't speak. Behind her, her niece stood in the doorway, watching quietly. Her sister's car pulled into the driveway a few minutes later. The headlights swept across the yard, then went dark. She saw the scene and understood without needing an explanation. No one ate dinner that night. The food stayed untouched on the table. Her sister went upstairs with her daughter. The others went to their rooms. The house stayed quiet until morning. The next day, she received a message from her ex-husband suggesting that the children stay with him for a while. She didn't reply immediately. Later that evening, her niece came downstairs holding a new box of nuggets. She said she had asked her mother to buy more, so everyone would stop arguing. She placed the box on the counter and went back upstairs. She opened the freezer to put it away and noticed a small note taped inside the door. The paper was damp and the ink had faded. Only the first 3 words were readable: "If this continues." The rest was illegible. She closed the freezer and left the note there. The new box remained on the counter until the next morning. Over the following days, routines resumed, though the tone in the house had changed. Her sister began spending more evenings at home to help with meals. She took over cooking more often, using the same system to keep her daughter's food separate. She thanked her for the help but said that everyone needed stability. She agreed and focused on finishing her school assignments and searching for a job. The tension remained under the surface but didn't escalate further. Her niece continued eating with the family, always with nuggets on her plate. The other children accepted it quietly, though no one talked about it anymore. Weeks passed without major incidents. Her sister began mentioning that it might soon be time for her to find a place of her own. She didn't argue. She had already started saving money from part-time work and applying for full-time positions. The argument stopped completely, but the change in the household dynamic didn't reverse. Her sister managed the family with more structure, keeping clear routines for meals and homework. Her niece's eating pattern stayed the same. By the end of the school term, she found a small apartment nearby. Her sister agreed to help her move once the lease was approved. The plan was for her and her children to relocate after she received her first paycheck from a new job. In the weeks before the move, the household remained orderly but distant. Each person followed their own schedule. The children played together less often. Meals continued, with the same arrangement at the table. On her last week in the house, her sister adjusted her work hours so she could be home more often. She wanted to maintain her daughter's stability after the change. She also wanted the transition to happen smoothly. The night before the move, dinner was prepared the same as always. Her sister cooked, and her niece's plate included chicken nuggets. The meal passed without conversation. Everyone finished and went to their own rooms afterward. The next morning, she packed her belongings and loaded them into a borrowed van. Her sister stayed home to assist. The move was completed by afternoon. Once she and her children were settled into the new apartment, she texted her sister to confirm they had arrived safely. Her sister replied that everything at her house was fine and that her daughter had eaten dinner without issue. They agreed to meet later in the week to exchange remaining belongings and discuss schedules for the cousins to see each other. That evening, her sister served dinner as usual. The 12-year-old niece had her plate prepared with nuggets placed next to the rest of her food. The air fryer timer went off. Her sister plated the meal, called everyone to the table, and sat down with them. The arrangement continued in the same pattern it had before. The freezer in her sister's kitchen still contained several bags of nuggets, stacked in a neat row behind other groceries. The house remained organized under the new routine. The situation between the two sisters was stable again, but the living arrangement that had begun after the divorce had officially ended. Each household now operated separately, with its own responsibilities and routines. He decided not to travel for Thanksgiving. Several months earlier, the mother of his daughters had died. They had separated before her death, but she remained a central part of his routine because of the children. Her absence changed every system that kept the household functioning. He managed work, daycare schedules, meals, and bedtime alone. It was his first year handling every part of parenting without help, and the thought of organizing a holiday trip with 2 toddlers seemed unmanageable. He lived in a city apartment. His sisters, Lauren and Tina, lived nearby. His brother Alex and his mother lived in another state about 2 hours away. Thanksgiving had always taken place at his mother's home, where each family member brought food to share. The plan had been the same for years, and everyone was expected to contribute. 95% of viewers aren't subscribed. Subscribing is free, takes seconds, and makes a real impact. Click subscribe and be part of the growth. Please turn on the bell for more updates. When the holiday approached, he reviewed what the trip would involve. He would need to prepare food, pack clothing and supplies for the children, and navigate the train system during the busiest travel season. Managing the children alone already took most of his energy. Adding cooking and travel made the idea unrealistic. He decided not to attend. He mentioned his plan to Lauren and Tina one evening. He explained that it would be too much to handle this year. They told him he should still come and that he did not have to cook. They said they could handle the food and use his kitchen to prepare it since it had more space. He agreed to that plan. When their mother learned about the arrangement, she contacted him. She said that everyone attending Thanksgiving needed to bring something and that he should not expect special treatment. He explained that his daughters were very young and that traveling with them and carrying food would be too difficult. She reminded him that when she had raised 4 children alone, she had never missed Thanksgiving. He told her that his daughters were toddlers and could not help the way he and his siblings once had. The call ended without agreement. The next morning, Alex called. He said their mother was upset and that he should not be making excuses. He told him that everyone else managed to help, and he should too. He replied that he simply could not this year. Alex said that his decision was selfish and hung up. After that, messages from his mother and brother stopped. The family group chat, which normally had photos, updates, and jokes, went quiet. Lauren checked in by text and said to ignore the tension. She promised they would handle the cooking. 3 days before Thanksgiving, his mother sent another message. She wrote that if he planned to come, he should at least bring something simple, like dessert. He replied that he would not attend under those conditions. The conversation ended there. On Thanksgiving morning, Lauren and Tina came to his apartment. They told him that their mother would calm down once she saw him and the girls. They said the children should see their grandmother and cousins. After a pause, he decided to go. He packed clothes, diapers, toys, and snacks for the train ride. They boarded the train together. The trip lasted about 2 hours. The sisters carried the food they had cooked. He managed the children and the bags. When they reached the station, they walked the remaining blocks to their mother's house. Their mother opened the door and greeted them. She looked at him and asked whether he had brought anything. He said he had not. She turned back toward the kitchen without comment. Inside, the house was busy. Lauren and Tina placed their dishes on the counter and helped arrange the table. Alex sat in the living room using his phone. The mother moved between the stove and the counter, checking each dish. He stayed near the hallway with the girls, helping them wash their hands and keeping them occupied. Dinner began around 5. Everyone sat at the long dining table. The family started passing dishes and serving food. Conversation focused on work, school, and daily matters. Halfway through the meal, Alex made a remark about people showing up to family events without contributing. The table became quiet for a moment. The topic changed, but the atmosphere did not. After dessert, Alex commented again, more directly this time. He said that everyone else had done their part, and some people needed to take responsibility. No one responded. Their mother remained silent. He stood, gathered his daughter's belongings, and told his sisters that he was leaving. His mother did not speak. He and his daughters left the house and walked to the nearby train station. They caught the next train home. Both girls fell asleep during the ride. When they reached the apartment, he carried the children to their room and laid them in bed. He returned to the kitchen and sat down. His phone buzzed with a message in the family group chat. Alex had sent a photo of the family at the table. Everyone was smiling. His chair was visible at the corner, empty. The caption from their mother's phone read, "Some people forget what family means." He placed the phone on the counter and did not look at it again for a while. After several minutes, another message arrived, this time from an unknown number. It said that he should ask his mother what she had told his daughters before he left. He checked the message, looked toward the hallway where the girls were sleeping, and returned to the kitchen. Another message appeared from the same number. It said that she had said something she should not have. He typed a short reply asking who was sending the messages. There was no response. After a few minutes, another message came with a photo attached. The photo showed his daughters sitting at the Thanksgiving table earlier that day. They were smiling. A napkin sat in front of them with handwriting that appeared to be his mother's. The words on it said, "Your daddy didn't want to be here." He stared at the screen. Another photo followed. It showed his mother's hand reaching to take the napkin away. A final message arrived from the same number. It said that his mother had told the girls their father did not love them enough to come to Thanksgiving. He set the phone down. Several minutes passed before another message appeared. It said that his mother planned to visit the next day to see the girls. He did not respond. The phone dimmed and went dark on the counter. He went to check on the children again. They were still asleep. He stood by the door for a moment, then went back to the kitchen. The next morning, he prepared breakfast and dressed the girls. Around mid-morning, there was a knock at the door. He did not answer. After a few minutes, a message appeared from his mother's number saying she had stopped by, but no one had come to the door. He did not reply. Later, Lauren sent a text asking if he was okay. He responded that he was. She did not mention their mother. The following day, Lauren visited in person. She brought food and said their mother wanted to see the girls. He said that now was not a good time. She stayed for a short while before leaving. In the days after Thanksgiving, there were no new messages from unknown numbers. The family chat resumed with occasional updates from cousins. His mother and Alex did not contact him. Tina sent a brief message about returning containers from the holiday. Lauren texted twice about routine matters. A week later, a new message appeared in the group chat. It was about Christmas dinner. The list of dishes included names next to each. His name was not listed. No one tagged or mentioned him. He did not respond. Later that week, he received a call from Lauren. She asked whether he would attend Christmas. He said he had not decided. She said that everyone wanted to be together again. He said he would think about it and ended the call. That weekend, another message arrived from an unsaved number. It contained no text, only a blank image file that failed to download. He deleted it. No further messages followed. As December went on, communication from his family stayed minimal. The group chat included a few photos of decorations and meals. No one mentioned Thanksgiving or what had happened. His mother did not reach out again. He continued his routine. Each morning, he woke the girls, prepared breakfast, and took them to daycare. Each evening, he picked them up and returned home. The phone remained on the counter where he had left it. The thread with the anonymous messages stayed in his inbox, but unopened. Christmas arrived and passed. He did not travel. Lauren texted once to say the gathering had gone well. He replied with a short acknowledgement. The exchange ended there. January began without contact from his mother or brother. His sisters continued occasional communication about the children. The anonymous number did not send any new messages. He left the old thread untouched. The last message in it was the one about his mother planning to visit. No explanation about who had sent the messages or how they had obtained the photos was ever given. Weeks passed. His daily schedule remained the same. The unanswered messages stayed saved in his phone memory. Nothing else about the situation changed. The following spring, family communication returned to a normal rhythm of group messages and brief updates. None of them referred to Thanksgiving. The anonymous number never contacted him again. The issue was never addressed by anyone, and no one provided an explanation for what had occurred. The thread on his phone remained where it was, ending with the message about his mother's planned visit. No additional messages appeared after that, and the matter was left unresolved. Emily Parker didn't expect the court to reach a decision that week. Her attorney had told her it could take longer, maybe another set of hearings, maybe another round of filings. But early on a Thursday afternoon, she received a message telling her that the final ruling in her divorce case had been signed and processed. When she opened the document on her phone, she saw 3 lines that immediately reshaped the life she had been living for more than a decade. Her husband, Mark Parker, had been awarded primary custody of their 3 children. He would keep the house she had spent years paying for, and she would be responsible for support payments that began the following month. 95% of viewers aren't subscribed. Subscribing is free, takes seconds, and makes a real impact. Click subscribe and be part of the growth. Please turn on the bell for more updates. Emily stayed in her car for several minutes, going over the main points again. There was no way to change anything at that moment. The order had already been filed. The only thing she could do was start moving through the list of tasks that came next. Her attorney sent a second message asking if she wanted to come in to review the paperwork in person, but she didn't respond. Instead, she put her phone down and drove out of the courthouse parking lot, not toward her temporary apartment, but toward the home of her sister, Sarah Nolan. Sarah lived in a suburban neighborhood on the west side of town. Her house was easy to find, and Emily had been there many times over the years. When Emily pulled into the driveway, she saw Sarah's car and the truck belonging to Sarah's husband, David Nolan. She walked to the front door and knocked. Sarah opened it and stepped aside to let her in. David was in the living room with their 2 kids. Sarah told him she needed a little time alone with Emily, and David understood immediately. He asked his kids to get their shoes and grab a few things, and he took them out to run errands. Once they were gone, Emily placed her bag on a side table, and Sarah guided her into the kitchen, where they sat at the small wooden table Sarah used for meal prep and homework. The 2 sisters remained in that kitchen for nearly an hour. During that time, Emily went through the parts of the ruling that mattered most. She explained the custody schedule the court had approved, one that gave Mark full-day responsibility during the school week, and gave her a limited rotating weekend arrangement. She mentioned the amount of support the judge had ordered, and the timeline for when the payments would begin. She explained that the house, which she had bought using a large portion of her salary from her corporate job, was awarded to Mark to ensure stability for the children. Sarah listened, taking in each detail as Emily laid out what the next few months were going to look like. By the time David returned with the kids, Emily had gathered her things and was preparing to leave again. She told Sarah she had several tasks to handle that afternoon. After she walked out, Sarah stood by the door for a moment while David waited to hear what had happened. When the door closed, Sarah walked him through each part of the ruling as she understood it. David didn't interrupt much. When she finished explaining, he made one brief comment about how the court had probably based its decision on the daily routines the family had lived with for years. He pointed out that Mark worked from home and handled most of the kids' schedules, while Emily's job required her to travel and often kept her out of state. Sarah disagreed immediately. She said that Emily's job was the reason the family had been financially secure and that the ruling didn't reflect that. Their conversation ended there, and they moved on to their normal tasks for the rest of the day. While Emily was at her sister's home, Mark was still at the Parker house. He had received his own digital copy of the ruling earlier that day. Once he printed the documents, he placed them on the kitchen counter and went through each section slowly. He marked the deadlines for updating school records, the steps for transferring utility accounts, and the instructions for enrolling in the state support payment system. He set the papers in a neat stack and made a mental list of the errands he would need to run over the next several days. When Emily arrived back at her temporary apartment that evening, she cleared a space on her table and put the printed ruling down in front of her. She took out a notebook and began listing the tasks she would have to complete. She wrote down every point she remembered from the call with her attorney earlier that day and added several reminders related to work. She logged into her company's HR portal to view the steps for updating her address, which she still needed to finalize once she found a more permanent place to live. The next morning, Emily began calling offices one by one. She started with the school district. She asked what was needed to update parental access under the new custody arrangement. They directed her to a specific form and told her where to submit it. She then contacted her bank, her insurance provider, and the state agency that handled child support processing. She didn't have a final address yet, but she asked each place what she would need to do once she did. After the calls, she opened her laptop again and searched through online rental listings, narrowing down options based on location, price, and availability. At the same time, Mark was handling his own set of tasks at the Parker home. He emailed the children's school and attached a copy of the custody order so they could update their records. He contacted the pediatrician's office and confirmed which parent would be responsible for upcoming appointments. He also reached out to the kids' activity coordinators to make sure they knew the household structure had changed. Over the next several days, Emily toured several apartments. She drove from location to location, meeting with property managers who walked her through available units. She checked room sizes, measured closet space, and asked about lease terms. She took notes on each place so she could compare them later. After visiting 3 locations in one day, she returned to her rental and separated the options into 2 groups, those that worked with her schedule and the children's visitation times, and those that didn't. Meanwhile, Mark continued updating documents at home. He logged into insurance portals, updated billing preferences, and confirmed that his automatic payments for utilities were scheduled correctly. He created a spreadsheet to track expenses for the next several months, adjusting numbers based on the new financial structure. By the end of the week, Emily chose 2 properties she considered the strongest options. She submitted rental applications to both. Each required proof of income, identification, and reference checks. She forwarded the applications to her attorney, who confirmed that both locations met the general requirements of the custody order. A few days later, one of the property managers contacted her and offered approval. She signed the lease for a 2-bedroom apartment located not far from the children's school and close enough to her company's regional office for days she needed to report in person. On the day Emily picked up the keys, she drove to the building with several boxes in her back seat. Sarah met her at the apartment to help her unload. The property manager went over basic information about parking and utilities, then handed her the keys. Emily and Sarah carried boxes into the unit and placed them in the appropriate rooms. When Sarah left, Emily stayed in the apartment to continue unpacking what she could. During that period, Mark kept the children on their routine schedule at the Parker home. He handled school mornings, after-school tasks, and his remote workload. He went through the support document again and made sure he understood the timeline for upcoming payments and account transfers. As Emily settled into the apartment, she contacted utility companies to set up service. She updated her records with her employer and her financial institutions. She notified the school district of her new address and submitted copies of her identification. She organized the children's sleeping spaces so they would have a place to stay during her visitation days. The first official exchange under the new custody schedule took place a short time later. Emily and Mark coordinated through the required messaging platform to confirm the transfer. They met in a designated public location, and the children moved their bags between vehicles. After the exchange, Emily drove them to her new apartment for their weekend schedule. For several weeks, this pattern continued. Emily organized her apartment, kept up with her job, and followed the custody schedule. Mark managed the children's daily routines, maintained the Parker home, and communicated with Emily only for logistical matters. Sarah kept in touch with Emily regularly, offering help with errands or apartment organization. David remained focused on his own routines, stepping in only when Sarah asked him to. Neither of them became more involved in the legal aspects. As the months went on, Emily filled her new apartment with more of her belongings. She bought additional furniture, rearranged storage, and organized her work materials. Mark continued handling school paperwork and household responsibilities at the Parker home. No new filings or changes to the ruling occurred. Both parents followed the structure that had been put in place. The children moved between the two households according to the schedule, and communication remained functional and limited to logistics. Emily kept adjusting her apartment, planning her work travel, and arranging her schedule around the custody calendar. And that was how things continued. Emily Parker did not realize anything was wrong until she stepped into the Carter family kitchen and saw that she was the only person in the room who had not come prepared for a lesson. She thought she was just stopping by with her boyfriend, Alex Carter, so he could grab a jacket and maybe steal a snack before they headed back out. Instead, she walked straight into a long dining table full of teenagers, open Bibles, and neatly stacked papers that looked a lot like tests. At the head of the table stood Alex's mother, Laura Carter, holding a stapled packet in one hand and a pen in the other. The teenagers sat in a row, facing her with the stiff posture that appears when someone is about to grade what you know. 95% of viewers aren't subscribed. Subscribing is free, takes seconds, and makes a real impact. Click subscribe and be part of the growth. Please turn on the bell for more updates. Emily paused just inside the doorway, while Alex offered a quick explanation that they had only dropped by for a minute. Laura waved them in anyway, clearly pleased that Emily had arrived in the middle of something she considered important. Emily moved closer to the counter, taking in the scene. She had been around the Carter family long enough to recognize the signs of one of their organized church nights. Their home functioned as an extension of the large Southern Baptist congregation they attended. She knew some of the teens from past visits and from polite introductions after services. On the surface, everything looked routine, but Emily still felt slightly out of place. Her own background was different. She had grown up in a quieter parish, worn plaid uniforms through Catholic school, memorized prayers and passages in a setting that felt structured, but in a different way. Her world had been rosaries, missals, and small sanctuaries, not giant stages and projection screens. Over the years she had dated Alex, those differences had come up more than once. Laura stepped over to the counter and picked up a single sheet from the stack resting beside her. Without much hesitation, she held it out toward Emily, as if this had been the plan all along. Emily accepted the page and saw a title at the top, along with numbered questions underneath. It was a Bible quiz, focused on doctrine and key passages. The layout was clean, the questions direct, the kind of thing a teacher prints after putting thought into what students should know. There was a history attached to that gesture that no one else in the room could see. Months earlier, at a Sunday lunch, Laura had steered a casual conversation into a discussion about future plans for marriage and children. Emily had tried to answer in a vague way, explaining that she and Alex had not decided anything about churches or traditions. Laura had pressed harder and finally admitted she worried that children raised in a Catholic setting might not learn enough scripture. Emily remembered that moment now as she held the quiz in her hand. She remembered every small look, every slight pause from Laura when Emily mentioned her schooling. She remembered how often the Carters framed their comments around knowing the Bible in the right way. It made the paper feel less like a friendly activity and more like a quiet exam she had not asked to take. Alex leaned closer to her and reminded her she did not have to do it. Emily appreciated the loyalty, but pride nudged her. She had spent years in classes that required more than memorization. She had studied scripture, written essays on theology, answered questions that went beyond the surface. There was a part of her that wanted to set the paper down and walk away, but another part of her wanted to show that being Catholic did not make her uninformed. She found a pen on the counter and moved to an empty corner of the kitchen. The first question came easily, and so did the next. Her hand moved steadily across the page as she filled in answer after answer. A few questions were clearly written from a Protestant perspective, but they still touched on concepts she knew well. She answered them according to what she had been taught, not bending her understanding to match the assumptions of the room. Only one question made her pause, a doctrinal point she knew differed between traditions. She thought for a moment, then wrote what she believed and what she had learned, knowing it would not perfectly align with Laura's answer key. When she was done, she returned the quiz to Laura. The teens were finishing theirs as well. Laura collected everything and began moving through the quiz with the group, using each question as a springboard into a short explanation. Emily stood near the end of the table, unobtrusive, watching the process unfold. For the first several questions, Laura's explanations lined up with what Emily expected. They were simple and direct, aimed at reinforcing specific points. The atmosphere felt like any other youth study night, focused and slightly stiff, but not unpleasant. Then Laura reached the question Emily had answered differently. She read the answer from her key and launched into a quick teaching moment built around her own denomination's doctrine. Listening to it, Emily realized the question itself had been vague. It assumed one framework as default and ignored that other Christians might answer differently without being wrong. She let the explanation finish, and then, almost against her better judgment, mentioned that the question could be answered another way depending on someone's background. Her tone stayed light. She did not contradict anyone. She simply added that the wording left room for more than one legitimate response. One of the teens turned toward her with open curiosity and wanted to know more. Emily described the version she had learned, laying out the difference the way her teachers had once done for her. She did not argue. She did not say one tradition was better. She simply explained how her church approached the question. Another teen followed up with a question of their own. The circle around her widened slightly as more of them shifted their attention to her. Emily kept her responses factual and straightforward. Whenever a misunderstanding surfaced, especially about Catholic belief, she gently cleared it up. Some of the teens seemed surprised to hear that much of what they had assumed was inaccurate. Others seemed intrigued by the idea that Christianity contained more variation than they had realized. From Emily's perspective, the conversation was calm and interesting. It felt like what good study should look like, people comparing notes and learning from each other. From Laura's perspective, the mood was very different. Emily could feel that from the way Laura's shoulders tightened and the way her gaze stayed fixed on her rather than the teens. Daniel Carter stood a few steps back with his arms folded, watching but not intervening. Every time Emily clarified something, Laura added a comment meant to steer the narrative back toward her original explanation. A few of those comments included the same misconceptions Emily had heard before. Each time that happened, Emily felt torn. Leaving the misconception alone felt dishonest, especially when the teens were clearly listening to both women. Correcting it risked deepening the tension that was gathering like a storm cloud over the end of the table. She chose a middle path, correcting only what seemed essential and always phrasing her clarification as gently as she could manage. The teens stayed engaged until Laura eventually redirected them, guiding the study back into the structured format she had planned. Emily stepped aside again, content to fade into the background. The rest of the session passed without drama, but the underlying strain did not disappear. It followed Emily upstairs when she and Alex finally left the group and moved to the living room. As soon as they were alone, the atmosphere changed. Alex did not sit beside her on the couch. Instead, he chose a chair across the room, posture stiff and expression guarded. Emily waited, giving him time to gather his thoughts, but the distance between them felt unfamiliar and uncomfortable. When he finally shared his thoughts, they landed hard. In his view, she had hijacked the study. He believed she had taken over the lesson to satisfy a need to be right. He believed she had made his parents look foolish in front of the teens by implying their quiz was flawed. Emily listened, trying to reconcile his description with her memory of the afternoon. She reminded him that she had only answered when the teens directed their questions to her, that she had not stepped in until they invited her. She pointed out that his mother had been the one to hand her the quiz and pull her into the session in the first place. The conversation did not resolve anything. Alex stayed withdrawn and cool, insisting that regardless of how it started, she should have stepped back sooner. By the time Emily left the house, she felt worn out and misunderstood. She told herself that a night's sleep might change things, that everyone might soften by morning once the emotions faded. Instead, her phone lit up later with a long message from Alex. He said his parents felt she had overstepped. They believed she had disrespected their authority in their own home, and in front of the kids they were trying to mentor. He admitted they had created the situation by putting her on the spot, but he still thought she owed them an apology for how she handled it. Emily stared at the text, feeling a tired sort of clarity settle over her. She thought about how the afternoon had unfolded from her perspective. The surprise quiz, the unspoken challenge tied to it, the curiosity of the teens, the weight of Laura's stare. She had walked into a room where the story about her had already been written in someone else's mind. No matter how careful she had stepped outside the lines of that story, and the reaction had been swift. The details of the Bible study replayed in her mind, not as a simple list of questions and answers, but as a moment when two different versions of faith and family collided. She realized that nothing about that afternoon had been neutral. It had been a test, in more ways than one, and she had passed the part that measured knowledge while failing the part that demanded quiet agreement. By the time she put her phone down, Emily understood that the quiz, the conversation, and the cold distance afterward had exposed something she could not ignore. The next time she walked into the Carter kitchen, if she walked in at all, everything would feel different. Evan had been counting down to this night for months. After over a year of scattered schedules and broken plans, he and his 4 college friends finally managed to align their calendars. All 5 of them, all 28 years old, had promised themselves they'd make it work. The plan was to revisit something from their past, a movie marathon at the Indie Theater downtown, the same place where they'd spent entire weekends back in school, watching films that made them feel like they understood something true about the world. Right next to the theater sat their old haunt, the cafe where they practically lived during those years. They knew the menu by heart. They knew which corner tables got the best light. They had history in that place, memories stacked on top of memories. 95% of viewers aren't subscribed. Subscribing is free, takes seconds, and makes a real impact. Click subscribe and be part of the growth. Please turn on the bell for more updates. It felt like returning to a time before everything got complicated, before careers and relationships and distance pulled them in different directions. Evan had kept the cinema's website bookmarked for 2 years, waiting for the right moment when they could all make it. Evan had sent a message to the group chat the day before. "Let's meet at the cinema early to grab seats," he wrote, already playing out the logistics in his head. In his mind, the plan was simple and obvious. They'd all know to show up a bit early, meet somewhere accessible, and get everything sorted before the first film started. It was the kind of plan that didn't need a lot of explanation. They'd done versions of it 100 times over 10 years of friendship. They had a rhythm. They had unspoken understandings. They could read each other. Evan was confident they still did, that 10 years of friendship had established patterns strong enough to survive a year apart. On the day of the marathon, Evan arrived at the cinema and found Tyler already waiting outside. Tyler was leaning against the wall, phone in hand, probably at work still. He always was, always connected to the office even on his days off. The theater doors weren't open yet, so they made a natural decision. They walked over to the cafe, the one that still looked exactly like it had years ago. Same color paint, same mismatched chairs at some tables, same bulletin board covered in local event flyers and community notices. They claimed a table near the window, the corner table where they'd spent countless afternoons during school, cramming for exams and debating about life and films. Evan ordered coffee. Tyler ordered the same. After they settled in, Evan took a photo of the two of them sitting there, two old friends reunited, smiling in that way people do when they're already remembering something before it's even over. He posted it in the group chat with a message, a simple image with a simple caption. He thought it covered all the bases. If anyone was confused about where to find them, that photo would make it clear. If anyone needed directions, they had them. He felt organized. He felt like he'd done his part. Then Rick showed up. He pulled up to the cinema around the time the box office actually opened, a solid 20 minutes before the first showing was scheduled to start. He walked straight through the doors, ready to buy his ticket and secure a good seat. Evan and Tyler were still at the cafe, maybe 60 feet away, visible if Rick had bothered to look around the building or if he'd checked his phone carefully. But Rick didn't do that. He assumed they were already in there somewhere, maybe in line at concessions or securing seats or standing in the lobby. He figured they would find each other soon enough. It was a small theater. Evan and Tyler figured Rick would realize where they actually were and come find them. One of them would text him, or he'd see the group chat photo, or he'd just know. They'd been friends for 10 years. Surely he'd figure it out. These kinds of small separations never lasted long. 20 minutes passed. The five of them were supposed to be together, about to start something they'd been planning for months, something that was supposed to feel like their college days again. But one person still hadn't arrived. Evan was beginning to wonder where Mark could be. Evan's focus was on the movie. He'd settled into the experience of being back here with his old friends, and he wasn't really checking his phone. Back at work, he'd left his phone on silent, a habit from meetings and conference calls and trying to be professional. He'd never switched it back after he'd left the office that morning. So when Mark had been trying to reach him, when Mark had actually called, Evan didn't see it come through. The phone just sat in his pocket, completely quiet, completely unnoticed. He was too engaged with the film, too happy to be here, too caught up in the moment of reunion. What Evan didn't know was that Mark had been sitting in his car outside the cinema in the rain. Mark had arrived exactly on time, maybe even a few minutes early. He'd driven across the city to be here, had rearranged his schedule, had made sure to book off from work to make this happen. He felt ready to be there, ready to walk into that theater and step back into their old friendship, to sit in a dark room with 4 people who knew him for 10 years. But he didn't see anyone outside. He looked around the parking lot, scanning for familiar cars. He checked the cinema entrance, wondering if they were all already inside. He waited a few minutes, thinking maybe they were running late, or maybe they were already inside, and he'd just missed them by seconds. But doubt started creeping in, the kind of doubt that builds quickly once it starts, feeding on every unanswered question. He didn't see Evan's car. He didn't see Tyler's car. He didn't see Rick's car. The group chat photo from the cafe didn't load properly on his phone. His internet was spotty in the parking lot. Or maybe he didn't think to check it. He felt the loneliness of standing alone in the rain, outside a building full of people, none of whom were his friends. Mark made a choice. He didn't call anyone else. He didn't text the group chat asking where they were. He didn't walk around to the cafe side of the building, didn't peer through windows, didn't try a different approach. He just sat there in his car for a while longer, watching the cinema doors, waiting for someone to emerge and explain. And when no one did, when enough time passed that it became clear he wasn't going to see Evan or Tyler or Rick or any of them, he convinced himself of something that felt inevitable. They had ditched him. They'd made plans, and then they'd decided to exclude him, and they'd gone ahead without him. He wasn't important enough to pursue. He wasn't important enough for a second phone call, a text, anything. Maybe he was always the last person they actually wanted around. Maybe he was the afterthought, the friend who got invited out of obligation, not because anyone really wanted him there. This thought felt true to him in a way that was almost physical. He drove home, the rain drumming on the windshield the whole way. Evan was maybe 30 minutes into the first film when he finally decided to check his phone. He pulled it out of his pocket, tapped the screen, and felt his attention immediately snap away from the movie. One missed call from Mark, and then a flood of messages, each one sharper than the last, and then a voice message, long, angry, full of profanity and frustration. Mark's voice came through loud and harsh, and Evan heard the whole story from Mark's perspective. Sitting in the car, looking for them, thinking they'd vanished, thinking they'd deliberately left him out. Mark said he was sick of being treated like an afterthought. He said they'd ghosted him. He said his friends weren't really his friends at all. The words hung there in the voice message, loaded with hurt that had clearly been building maybe longer than just this one night. Evan felt the weight of it immediately. He understood right away that something had gone wrong, that Mark had experienced this night completely differently than the rest of them had. The mistake suddenly seemed obvious in hindsight, a chain of small failures that had added up to complete misunderstanding. One phone call. Mark had tried to reach him, and Evan's phone had been silent. One attempt, and when it didn't work, when there was no immediate response, Mark had spiraled into a conclusion that felt true to him in that moment. Evan typed out a response. He apologized. He explained what had happened. They'd been at the cafe the whole time. The photo should have shown where they were. His phone had been on silent and he'd missed the call. He offered to buy Mark a ticket to the next showing, to make it right, to prove that this had been a misunderstanding and nothing more. Mark's response came back quickly. No, it was too late. He wasn't interested in catching the next showing. He didn't want a ticket, or a substitute, or a makeup plan. The damage was done. He felt what he felt, and no replacement showing was going to fix that feeling of abandonment, that sense of being left out in the rain while his friends moved on without him. Evan sat in the dark theater, the film still playing in front of him, but his mind was already somewhere else. He replayed the timeline over and over, wondering about all the small moments where things could have been different. If his phone hadn't been on silent, if Mark had called one of the others instead, if the photo had loaded properly on Mark's phone, if any number of small details had been slightly different, Mark would be sitting somewhere in that theater right now, watching the same film. But those details had lined up exactly as they had, and now Mark was home, angry and hurt, convinced that he'd been pushed out and left behind. Karen Martinez had always been someone who found joy in small gestures. After 40 years of marriage to David, she'd developed a routine that felt like love in its purest form. Every morning before he left for work, she'd make him coffee and breakfast. It wasn't about obligation. It was about those quiet moments together at the kitchen table before the day pulled them apart. They'd built a life on consistency, on showing up for each other in the everyday moments that nobody else noticed. Over 4 decades, that ritual had become the foundation of their marriage. David used to say that those mornings were what made everything else manageable. Even on difficult days, knowing Karen would be there with coffee and warmth made the chaos of the world feel temporary and bearable. 95% of viewers aren't subscribed. Subscribing is free, takes seconds, and makes a real impact. Click subscribe and be part of the growth. Please turn on the bell for more updates. When her son Marcus and his wife Jennifer had to stay with them temporarily due to water damage in their home, Karen saw it as an opportunity to extend that same kindness. The contractors had told them 3 to 4 weeks, maybe longer if the flooring repairs complicated things. There was talk of mold remediation, subflooring replacement, all the devastating details that came with water damage to a home. The insurance company was already being difficult about coverage, which only added stress to an already overwhelming situation. Karen welcomed them warmly, offered them a place to land, and settled into the rhythm of having a full house again. She was thrilled, actually. She hadn't realized how much she missed having her son close by. Marcus was 32 now, lived about 40 minutes away, and their weekly phone calls couldn't replicate the comfort of him being nearby. Having him under her roof again felt like a gift, even under these difficult circumstances. Marcus and Jennifer arrived on a Thursday evening in early September. They were grateful, tired from dealing with insurance adjusters and cleanup crews all week long. The house had smelled like wet carpet and chemicals for days. Jennifer's clothes were still mostly in storage in the garage, packed into plastic bins. Both of them looked defeated by the logistics of displacement, the uncertainty of how long this situation would last. Over breakfast the next morning, Karen asked if they wanted coffee, if they wanted anything special before heading to work. Both had to maintain their jobs despite everything falling apart around them. Jennifer worked as a marketing manager downtown at a tech firm, and Marcus was in pharmaceutical sales with a territory stretching across 3 counties. They said no to food, but yes to coffee. Jennifer said she'd take whatever Karen made. It seemed simple and uncomplicated. Karen made 2 extra cups and placed them on the table with care. She asked them to let her know if they wanted her to adjust anything, if they had preferences about cream or the blend she used. She genuinely wanted them to feel comfortable, to know that hospitality meant something real in this house. That first week was normal, even pleasant in many ways. Jennifer took her coffee black. Marcus preferred his with cream and a little sugar. Karen remembered both preferences without writing them down. She'd been managing details like this for decades, understanding that the small preferences were what made people feel known and truly cared for. Everyone seemed content. There were no complaints, no special requests, no demands of any kind. Jennifer would sometimes thank her, and Marcus would mention how nice it was to have a hot breakfast waiting before work, how much it eased his morning stress. Karen felt that familiar satisfaction that came from taking care of people she loved. It reminded her of when Marcus was younger, and she'd packed his lunch before school every morning, how he'd trusted her completely. David was pleased too, seeing his son happy and settled, even if the circumstances bringing them together weren't ideal. It was on the 6th day that things shifted. Jennifer sent Karen a text message around 11 p.m. after everyone had gone to bed. The message was polite, but formal in a way that felt different from their earlier interactions. It said she'd left instructions for her coffee on the counter. Jennifer explained that she had very specific needs in the morning, dietary preferences and morning routines that helped her manage stress and anxiety. She wanted to make sure Karen understood exactly how to prepare it, so there wouldn't be any confusion or miscommunication. She emphasized that this was important to her, something she'd been doing for several years. She ended the message with a thank you and an emoji, but something in the tone felt like a line had been drawn. Karen saw the message when she got home from her night shift around 6:30 in the morning. She was exhausted. Her body ached. She'd worked 8 hours under fluorescent lights at the hospital where she worked as a night shift nurse, dealing with emergencies and chaos and people in crisis. A patient had coded around 3 a.m., and the emotional weight of that unsuccessful resuscitation had left her completely depleted. All she wanted was to sleep. But she read the message. Instructions. On the counter. When Karen made her way to the kitchen to make David his coffee, she found them. 3 pages of handwritten notes in Jennifer's neat, precise handwriting. Not suggestions, not preferences. Instructions. Detailed, specific instructions that read almost like a formal contract. The pages outlined a process that looked less like making coffee and more like a chemistry experiment. Foamed milk on top, created using a specific technique that required aerating the milk to a particular thickness. 2 different syrups added at precise moments in the process, with exact measurements specified. A specific coffee bean variety that needed to be ground fresh, with particular grind settings Karen would need to reference. A brewing method that required equipment her simple drip coffee machine could not produce. There were temperature specifications, exact timing notes that took up an entire page. The instructions were meticulous. They were demanding. They were elaborate and professional grade in their specificity. At the bottom, Jennifer had written that she'd brought equipment to make this easier, and it was sitting on the counter by the toaster, still in its packaging. Karen looked at the bottles and the grinder and the metal pitcher. She looked at the 3 pages of notes. It was 6:35 a.m. She had 2 hours before she needed to sleep so she could work again the next night. She was standing in her own kitchen in her work scrubs, which smelled like hospital antiseptic and exhaustion. Her feet hurt. Her back hurt from helping move a patient who'd fallen. She'd strained something in her lumbar spine again. Karen stood there in her work clothes, running the words over and over in her mind. She was 63 years old. She'd worked through the entire night. Her eyelids felt heavy. Her body felt heavy. She looked at the coffee maker she'd owned for 15 years. She looked at the notes again, trying to understand what would happen if she didn't follow them exactly. Would Jennifer be upset? Would Marcus say something to her about it? Would this temporary living situation become even more complicated? What did it mean to be hospitable versus to allow yourself to be taken advantage of? Where was the line between generosity and self-sacrifice? Karen didn't have answers, and she was too tired to find them. Karen made regular coffee. She made it the way she always did. 1 cup for David, 1 for Marcus, 1 for Jennifer. She made it in 15 minutes, not the 45 minutes that Jennifer's detailed instructions seemed to require. She used her regular beans and her regular drip machine. She set the 3 cups on the table and went to bed. She didn't overthink it. She was too tired to overthink it. When Jennifer came down for breakfast before work, she took 1 look at her coffee and asked if Karen had made it according to the instructions. Her voice was casual, but something underneath it wasn't. Karen said no. She said she'd made regular coffee, the kind she always made. Jennifer's face shifted. She looked at the cup like it had disappointed her personally. Jennifer set it down without tasting it, and said that if Karen wasn't going to make the coffee properly, she shouldn't have offered in the first place. She said that when you invite someone to do something, you follow through. You do it right. You don't make a half effort. Karen, running on 4 hours of sleep across 2 days, standing in her own kitchen in her pajamas, responded that she was not a Starbucks barista. She was a tired mother-in-law, making coffee in her own kitchen before going to bed. She wasn't going to perform elaborate procedures with specialty equipment to satisfy someone else's morning beverage preferences, no matter the instructions. She was being hospitable by opening her home. She was being hospitable by making coffee at all. The conversation escalated quickly. Jennifer said she felt disrespected, that this was about basic hospitality and effort and consideration. Karen said that basic hospitality was already being extended. She'd opened her home. Jennifer left the house angry. She didn't drink the coffee. She texted Marcus before reaching her car. That afternoon, Marcus texted his mother. He said that Jennifer had been upset. He said that Karen hadn't been hospitable. He said that if she wasn't willing to accommodate requests, maybe this arrangement wasn't working out. He didn't raise his voice in the text. He didn't make accusations, but the implication was clear. Karen had failed some test she didn't know she was taking. She had disappointed her son. Karen couldn't sleep that day, even though she desperately needed to. She lay in bed thinking about the text, replaying the conversation, wondering if she'd been unreasonable. She thought about the 3 pages of instructions. She thought about what hospitality actually meant. She thought about the difference between kindness and obligation, between generosity and servitude. She thought about working night shifts exhausted and being asked to perform tasks that required energy and patience she didn't have. She thought about her son taking his wife's side, implying somehow that her boundaries were selfish. By evening, she still didn't have answers. All she had was the weight of knowing that something had shifted in her home. The warmth had cooled. The gratitude had been replaced with something else entirely. The coffee that she'd made with care had become a test, and she'd failed it. Or she'd passed it by refusing to fail herself. She genuinely couldn't tell which anymore, and in that uncertainty, the real conflict had begun. Thanks for watching Story Frame. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the bell for more updates. See you in the next video.